Hello, it's the 11th of February and you're watching our afternoon edition of Arirang News. It's good to have you with us. I'm PyeongChang. The date and now finally the location of the second North Korea-U.S. summit has been announced. President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un will be meeting in the Vietnamese capital of Hanoi on the 27th and 28th of February. We'll look at the progress made so far towards that meeting later in the program. But first, we head over to our news center, where Devin Whiting has the latest headlines for us. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. South Korea and the United States have finally agreed on how to share the costs of stationing American troops in Korea this year. It took 10 rounds of negotiations. Seoul will be paying a bit more this year than it has in the past. Park Ji-won reports.
South Korea and the U.S. have finally reached an agreement on this year's defense cost-sharing deal, with Seoul's financial contribution for the stationing of some 28,000 American troops on the Korean peninsula and $924 million. That's 8.2% more than Seoul contributed last year, reflecting a rise in South Korea's defense budget this year. The signing ceremony for the deal was held Sunday afternoon at the Foreign Ministry in Seoul by both countries' negotiators, Chang Won-sam and Timothy Betts. Washington's top negotiator Betts also met with South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa before signing the agreement. In their meeting, Kang said the allies were able to close the gap on the size of South Korea's contribution thanks to goodwill and trust. She also said she was glad that the protracted negotiations ended with a successful result. Betts also said the U.S. is pleased with the results, acknowledging Seoul's contribution to the alliance. From last March, the allies had 10 rounds of talks on the issue and dozens of working-level consultations. In those, the U.S. had asked South Korea to pay the cost of operating strategic assets, but Seoul said those do not fall under the original scope of the allies' cost-sharing agreement, which are meant to mainly to pay for the salaries of South Koreans working at U.S. military bases in the country and costs related to facility construction and logistics. So the costs of strategic asset operations were not included in the final deal. The two sides had also difficulty on the final amount, as the Trump administration reportedly demanded an annual sum of around $1 billion when the negotiations were close to an end late last year. Also, the deal was originally going to be for 5 years, but the U.S. insisted on just 1 year. In the end, they struck a 1-year deal with no automatic extension. But a foreign ministry official in Seoul said the deal could be extended if the two sides agree. The signed agreement is called preliminary as of now, since it needs to be approved by South Korea's National Assembly. The U.S. does not require the approval from Congress. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
As part of North Korea's denuclearization, there have long been calls for inspections by the IAEA to see what kind of facilities the regime has. But Russia's ambassador to Pyongyang says inspections should be carried out by the world's nuclear powers, because the IAEA only covers the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Ambassador Alexander Matsugora was speaking in an interview with Sputnik, referring to nuclear powers including Russia, the U.S., and China. And if North Korea were to denuclearize, he said, it's highly unlikely that Russia would let in and store radioactive material from the country. In the meantime, a summit is expected to take place between North Korea and Russia. The ambassador said it's the #1 bilateral agenda for the two sides and that a date and venue will be decided soon. South Korean President Moon Jae-in expressed high hopes today for the upcoming North Korea-U.S. summit. Speaking to his top aides, the president said the second Kim-Trump summit would be a step forward on the path to denuclearization. Have a listen.
이미 큰 원칙에 합의한 한반도의 완전한 비핵화, 새로운 북미 관계, 한반도 평화 체제를 보다 구체적이고 가시적으로 진전시키는 중대한 전환점이 될 것이라고 기대합니다.
The South Korean president also said that the peace process that started last year is making progress in bringing the Korean peninsula closer to prosperity and peace. And he said his government will do its utmost to keep dialogue going between Seoul, Pyongyang, and Washington and continue the work it's been doing. Another sign the South Korean economy is slowing down. Data show inventories at local manufacturers have risen to their highest point in about 2 decades. Kim Hae-sung reports.
South Korea's manufacturing sector inventory to sales ratio for December recorded 116%, marking the highest level since September 1998. A rising ratio means a faster buildup in inventories than goods sold, usually indicating a slowing economy. Data from Statistics Korea show the ratio has been spiking since late last year. After hitting around 107% in October, it soared past 111% in November.
The higher ratio signals a slowing economy and even recession. As inventories grow, companies start producing less. Investment shrinks further, leading to an economic contraction. In particular, auto and semiconductor sales have been falling in recent months, mainly due to sluggish exports and the slowing Chinese economy.
South Korea's manufacturing sector factory operating rate recorded 73% in December, the lowest level in 8 months. As for Korean automakers, shipments plunged 7% on month in December, while their combined inventory ratio rose 6.5%. Semiconductor shipments dropped 5%, while their warehouse stock rose 4%. Shipments of primary metals, including steel, fell 2.5%, while inventory jumped more than 3%. 김혜성, 아리랑 뉴스.
A lot of pundits think that a peaceful Korean peninsula could help build peace globally. On the basis of that idea, the South Korean resort town of PyeongChang has been holding a special forum over the past 3 days, bringing experts together from around the world to find ways to continue and expand the peace process. Won Jung-hwan reports.
A sustainable future and the end of the Korean War are the two of the key actions the PyeongChang Declaration for Peace 2019 is pushing for. The declaration calls for a number of action plans, including for all governments to increase their commitment to support and enforce international disarmament laws, the two Koreas to bring the Korean War to an end, and to craft peace and cooperation in the region, and the UN to fully implement resolutions concerning preventing violations of women's rights. The forum was held to mark the anniversary of the Winter Olympics by building on its legacy. PyeongChang 2018 was praised for its role in the process towards peace on the divided Korean peninsula thanks to North Korea's participation in the global sporting event. The momentum started by PyeongChang 2018 led to talks at all levels with North Korea, including the Inter-Korean Summits and the North Korea-U.S. Summit, thawing their strained relationships through the power of sports. To build on that legacy, participants from around the world have spent the last 3 days engaging in the in-depth discussions in their related fields with the goal of helping build peace. The 2019 PyeongChang Global Peace Forum was composed of 6 sessions, including disarmament, poverty, gender, and human rights. Global participants actively shared their experiences and discussed common issues and challenges, which will become part of the framework of the PyeongChang Agenda for Peace 2030. The forum ended on Monday, but the platform will serve as an invitation to a larger audience of peacemakers from around the world to engage with over the coming year, with an aim of coming up with an official agenda when they meet again next year. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스, 평창.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
So the next meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un is coming up at the end of the month in Hanoi, and pressure is now building on Trump to come back with more on North Korea's denuclearization than he did in his last meeting with Kim in Singapore last June. A number of U.S. lawmakers have already been expressing their doubts. Lee Ji-won has this report.
There are now only a couple of weeks left until the second North Korea-U.S. summit in Hanoi. But U.S. politicians seem to have low expectations. That's according to The Hill on Sunday. Bob Menendez, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, said his bar is low based on what he saw at the first summit in Singapore. He added he does not see the necessary preparation that's needed to make a successful summit, and that above all, the two sides, quote, should first agree on the definition of what denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula means. This comes after U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun's remarks at Stanford University late last month. when he said Pyongyang and Washington do not have a specific and agreed definition of what final fully verified denuclearization is. Democrat Jack Reed backed up his skepticism by the continued lack of an inventory from the North Koreans on their nuclear program. He said it's going to be hard for U.S. negotiators to come up with a tangible denuclearization progress, since there has been no declaration of what nuclear sites, nuclear material, and facilities are in the North. A number of senior Republican senators were also careful not to get too carried away. Mitt Romney says there are high hopes for the summit, but there aren't any particular expectations, as the North Koreans have, quote, proved over the years that their promises aren't worth much. Romney said he would love to see specific commitments from the North, but only time will tell. President Trump's defenders in Congress, however, continued to express confidence that there will be concrete commitments from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Vietnam. Senate James Inhofe said President Trump wouldn't be going forward with another summit if he didn't expect good results from it, and that Kim Jong-un wouldn't have come back as well if he isn't going to be more cooperative. 이지원, 아리랑 뉴스.
Joining us today to give his thoughts on the latest developments, we have with us Dr. Woo Jung-yup, a research fellow at the Sejong Institute here in Korea. It's good to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So there was much movement over the weekend. Let's start with that announcement of the location for the North Korea-U.S. summit. Trump confirmed on Twitter that it will be taking place in Hanoi. Speculation went back and forth over which place it would take place, either Hanoi or Da Nang. And there were some reports that said the U.S. and the North Koreans had different location preferences. So now they've decided on Hanoi. Is there one side this location works better for, or does it not really matter that much?
Yeah, there was a report that the U.S. government preferred to have the meeting at Da Nang in Vietnam. But I think it's a matter of convenience rather than like more of political issues for the U.S. government. Because there was a APEC meeting in 2017 in Da Nang. U.S. government already did a security checkup for its president. So it's easy for them to redo it. However, more political meaning is carried on by having a meeting at Hanoi for North Korean government, because there's a high possibility that the Vietnamese government is going to invite North Korean leader Kim Jong-un as a state guest. And it has also practical meaning for North Korea. We observed in Singapore last year that Singaporean government invited Kim Jong-un as a state visit guest. In that way, Singaporean government can pay for the expenses for the North Korean delegations staying in Singapore. So I think that for North Korea, visiting Hanoi is more of political meaning and much more weight than U.S. convenience in having Da Nang. So I think that's why the U.S. gave small concession to North Korean government.
Would you still say it is a small concession?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, would you say as in like it is something the U.S. is giving to North Korea, at least a little something?
Yeah. It is clear that the U.S. prefers Da Nang, and now the U.S. agrees to have the meeting at Hanoi. So it's a small concession, but it's very difficult for the U.S. to demand North Korea to give back something in return because of this small concession.
Also during the weekend, the U.S. Special Representative of North Korea, Stephen Biegun, he returned from 3 days of talks, working level talks in Pyongyang, and he said the talks were productive, but that there was still some hard work left to do. What do you make about the content of the talks, and what do we know about it, and what impression did you get from Stephen Biegun's comments?
So even if Stephen Biegun made a huge progress while he was in Pyongyang for 2 nights, however, because he has to save the best for the presidential meeting at the end of February. However, it will be very difficult for them to find the middle ground at this time, because there was a huge difference between two governments. And Stephen Biegun mentioned before he left Pyongyang that U.S. is not ready to ease the sanctions for the North Korean government. However, what North Korean government needed is lifting sanctions or easing the sanction. So it is very unlikely that two sides find the middle ground and to reconcile the differences about whether there is going to be easing the sanctions or lifting sanctions. So I think there was discussions by two sides on every issue. However, it might be very difficult for them to reach an agreement at this time.
Before Began returned to Washington, he stopped off in Seoul to brief South Korean officials about what had gone on in Pyongyang. And among some of the things he is reported to have said, he described the talks not as a negotiation and that it was more about a meeting to put forward their positions. Does that suggest then that they might not have made much headway towards some sort of agreement towards this summit?
So it is a productive meeting, and there was a progress since we didn't have this kind of talks in the latter half of 2018. So from Mr. Began's point of view, that there was a progress by having this kind of talks with his counterpart, who is the Ambassador PyeongChang, who's now like official position is special representative for the U.S. policy in State Committee. So I think that is a huge progress from the U.S. point of view. However, as we just discussed, that there is a huge difference between two governments about what kind of corresponding measures should be provided to the North Korean governments for what it already took, like dismantlement of Punggye-ri and removing of like Dongchang-ri missile engine site. And then what North Korea wants is that if U.S. is providing some kind of corresponding measures, which means easing the sanctions or lifting sanctions, then North Korea might be able to consider that dismantlement of Yongbyon nuclear facilities. So there's this huge differences between two governments. So I think the time is too short for them to reach an agreement on these issues this time.
You mentioned many things there, but Began's comments, not a negotiation. I mean, it does sound like, it was just laying out their positions, but to do that for 3 days seems, I don't know, it doesn't seem to add up to me. They must have had some sort of maybe give and take or some sort of negotiation, really, shouldn't they?
So I think that it carries some kind of meaning when he mentioned that it's not negotiation. That means that when it comes to the negotiation, you have to agree on what kind of destinations you agree to reach, right? But in Singapore, we have some like vague meaning of the goal of the negotiations. So President Trump and Chairman Kim agrees to work toward the complete denuclearization of Korean Peninsula. But South Korea's Minister of Unification mentioned during the National Assembly meeting that the meaning of the complete denuclearization of Korean Peninsula is different in North Korea from international community's view on that same term. So when they don't agree on the complete denuclearization of Korean Peninsula, it's going to be very difficult for them to find a way to reach that point. So I think the first thing that Stephen Biegun might demand North Korea to agree is what that term's definition is.
There has been speculation that the US is willing to make some sort of compromises and agree on some sort of small deal towards North Korea's denuclearization. However, interestingly, South Korea's spokesperson, Blue House spokesperson, weighed in and said, when asked directly about this, he said it's not the position of the administration, the small deal, and that they are on the same page as Washington on this. What should we make of that comment?
So regardless of what kind of measures were exchanged by U.S. government and North Korean government, small deal implies that that deal does not guarantee that it's going to denuclearize North Korea. So anything that does not guarantee the full and verified denuclearization of North Korea, it should not be satisfying to the international community, including South Korean government. So any deal can be made at this point, but that deal should lead to the final denuclearization of North Korea in the end. But if there is no guarantee of FFVD, but they made a certain deal to continue the dialogue, it should not be satisfying to the South Korean government. I think that Blue House spokesperson mentioned in that way.
Let's bring it back to that report we started with. As mentioned, many US politicians have already expressed their doubts over what Trump can bring back from his summit with Kim Jong-un. What does Trump need to bring back? What kind of deal does it have to be that it can convince his critics that he's done a good deal, or at least silence them of the criticisms?
The critical view is coming from the fact that Chairman Kim has never specified what the complete denuclearization of Korean Peninsula means. So we expect that by using the term complete denuclearization of Korean Peninsula, we expect that North Korea would abandon all its nuclear weapons and programs, which was specified in 2005 September 19 joint agreement. In that joint agreement, North Korea specified that it's going to abandon all of its nuclear weapons and programs and going back to the non-proliferation treaty, and it's going to be inspected by IAEA. But the terms that we used in Singapore summit did not specify all those conditions that should be achieved at the end of the negotiation. So if President Trump and Chairman Kim agrees to define what the complete denuclearization of a Korean Peninsula, I think there is going to be much more like positive reviews spread in Washington.
What's quite curious at the moment actually is the North Korean state media has yet to make any mention of the upcoming summit, either the date or the location or any of those details. We talked a little bit about this last time, but why do you think they're avoiding talking about this, and how long can that go on for?
I think that when Chairman Kim is going to leave for Vietnam for the summit with President Trump, they are going to announce in the state media or the media that North Korea controls. However, at this time, that it is unlikely to have that kind of report in North Korean media because North Korean government cannot be sure that what kind of deal they are going to have. So if North Korea is going to get some kind of like political or diplomatic measures from the US government, it's very difficult for them to convince its own people because now the political or diplomatic relations with the United States improved, but without sanction lift, the economic condition of the North Korea will continue to be the same. Then it's going to be difficult for the North Korean regime to convince its own people that they are doing the great thing for its own people. So I think it's why that they are very cautious on making this public to its own people.
Do you think they might be holding back as well? Because there's a possibility that it could also be postponed or cancelled again, like last time what happened as well.
In the last time that the cancellation from the President Trump was caused by the letter and the statement by the North Korean government official. So I doubt that North Korean government or government officials would do the same thing again. Then it's going to be less likely that President Trump canceled the meeting this time.
And finally, the Blue House, South Korea's Blue House, has also said that President Moon will be holding a phone call with President Trump in the near future about these upcoming summit. And South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa will also meeting with the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo soon as well. So a lot of interaction going on between South Korea and the US over this upcoming summit. But then actually, what is South Korea's role in this? You know, what does South Korea have to do with this next summit?
The first thing is that we have to know what the differences are between United States and North Korean government. So if there is anything that South Korean government narrow the differences, then we should do it. And second, that last time that President Trump mentioned that he's going to suspend all the military drills between the allies without mentioning to South Korean government in advance. So avoiding that kind of surprise is also the important thing for the Korean government this time. So I think that is why the Blue House mentioned that President Moon is going to talk with President Trump about all the various issues this time.
What do you think the South Korea are expecting from this summit? What are the points that they're looking forward to?
We really don't know yet because what differences are there between the United States and North Korean government. So I think finding out what kind of differences and how big the differences are is very important for South Korean government to know that.
Well, we're looking forward to this next summit. We hope you get your thoughts on it when it does happen as well.
Thank you
for coming today.
Thank you.
And that's where we bring our show to a close. I'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth talk on the day's top stories. In the meantime, thanks for watching and I hope you can join us again next time. Goodbye for now.